Hi, my name is Dr. Asia Eaton. I'm a psychological scientist and public psychologist, and this is Mindbridge, where science meets human rights. In this podcast, we invite human rights defenders to teach and learn from brain and behavioral scientists about how we can all use science to do human rights work that is more efficient and impactful.
Hello, it is March 17th, 2026, and this Mindbridge podcast is about body image, body appreciation, and sexual health. We have our human rights defender, Heidi Sproull, and our psychological scientist, Jaclyn Siegel. Heidi Sproull is a psychotherapist, self-defense instructor, and sexual health educator with more than 30 years of experience. Her book, Informed Adolescence, a middle school curriculum with lessons on teen resilience, sexual health, and boundary setting, was released in 2025. Heidi is an AASECT certified sex therapist. Her psychotherapeutic work uses a fully intersectional lens for sexual health, chronic pain, and recovery from sexual and other forms of trauma to support her clients' mental, physical, and emotional wellness throughout the lifespan. Heidi earned a black belt in jiu-jitsu in 2005 and has taught practical self-defense workshops for over 30 years. Additionally, she teaches internationally with workshops on self-defense and boundaries, somatic and sexual sovereignty, consent certainty, and more. She has a bachelor's in speech from Northwestern University and a master's in social work from University of Chicago. She also has a certificate in sexual health from the University of Michigan and resides in Ann Arbor. Welcome, Heidi.
Hi, thank you. So glad to be here.
Dr. Jaclyn Siegel is a clinical research specialist in the Department of Epidemiology and Community Health at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. She's also a research fellow at the Kinsey Institute for Research in Sex, Gender, and Reproduction at Indiana University, and an adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology at San Diego State University. Starting in fall 2026, she will be an assistant teaching professor in the Department of Psychology at Villanova University. Her research program broadly aims to understand the embodied and psychological consequences of adverse social treatment and cultural pressures, with a specific focus on mental health, body image, and sexuality. She has published over 30 peer-reviewed manuscripts on topics related to her research interests and various other book chapters and editorials. She sits on the editorial boards for Psychology of Women Quarterly, Psychology of Men and Masculinities, Sex Roles, Body Image, and Frontiers in Social Psychology. Welcome.
Hi, happy to be here.
All right, let's get started. Heidi, how did you get involved in work on body image, body appreciation, and sexual health?
Well, I got into the field through the trauma lens. I became a social worker in 1992, and I'd been working with martial arts and self-defense and standing up for women's rights and the rights of other marginalized people prior to that. And I felt like I was always working on the back end with resolving trauma. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I want to go upstream and keep people from being thrown in. So how can we work with empowering people to feel good about their bodies, finding a clear sense of who they are, what's right for them in their life, in their lived experience, how to articulate their needs and wants through a pleasure-focused lens? And then how do we counter that stream of narrative culturally that tells us that no matter what we do, we're not good enough, we're not pretty enough for love, we're not handsome or hot enough to find a partner, and how these narratives really impede a person's ability to be present in an embodied self, for life, like what our mind thinks, what our body feels, what our emotions say around who we are as a spiritual person, and then how all of that impacts our sense of our sexual self.
Now, you've said a lot there, and I've got to back up for myself and for the listeners. What does it mean to be embodied or to have embodied pleasure or embodied sexual health?
So from my psychotherapeutic lens, as a practitioner, as well as in my teaching around sex ed, I believe that we are all human beings we are essentially a spirit residing in a body, and we live in that body that feels things, does things, and uses its senses to interact with the world. As a being living in a body, we have thoughts. We have many thoughts, and sometimes those thoughts go well with the body, and sometimes they're in conflict. A perfect example of that is like if you're lying in bed at night and you're exhausted and you've got a big day tomorrow and your brain just won't shut up. Who you are just wants to go to sleep and your brain won't shut off. So that's how we know we are a person having thoughts, but our thoughts aren't all of who we are. Same thing is if you've got a big thing to do the next day and you wake up feeling sick, right? You want to do the thing, but your body isn't well. Same things with emotions. Sometimes we have an emotion that's legit. I'm mad about something, but I'm feeling it at a level 10 rather than a level 2 or 3. So when I talk about an embodied sense of self, being that self that understands and is in contact with what our body is feeling and experiencing, what our mind is thinking and reacting to, and what our emotions are responding to and at what level. And so an embodied sense of a sexual self includes all of those aspects, from that sense of I am, your capital I, of a self. Does that explain it?
It sure does. It also sounds, if I'm going to be quite honest, kind of scary to be fully embodied. But that's coming from somebody who, spent her life in academia and likes to live in her head, which brings me to Jaclyn, our scientist.
Let
Jaclyn.
me just say, nobody's ever fully embodied,
Okay.
right? It is a constant moving constellation. But when we know we have all these aspects of ourselves, it helps us be more present with a given moment and who we are. Don't mean to be scare anybody.
No, I
No,
appreciate it.
it's funny that you say that, Asia. As a person who, is in academia, does all this research on embodiment, I'm hearing Heidi talk and I am like, yes, exactly. That's exactly what I study. And then I'm hearing you, Asia, say, that sounds really scary. And I'm reflecting, I literally, not 20 minutes ago, got out of therapy with my own therapist, and she is constantly telling me, you do all this work, academically, but you're so in your head about everything. Like you don't feel things in your body. And so, you can have all this awareness, you can do all this work, you can read all the books and have all the language, but to actually do the work is so much harder than writing the paper on it. And so I think the tension that we're talking about here of like, we have all this language for it, we can talk so comprehensively and intelligently about this stuff. And then the difficulty of actually doing it is something that I think is so true for so many people, including myself.
Well, Jaclyn, tell us a little bit about what you do study and the papers you have written and how you spend your days.
Yes, so I have a pretty broad research portfolio that covers a lot of what Heidi has talked about. It is amazing that the two of us have found ourselves in this space together because so I struggle to describe my research portfolio because it's quite broad, and every word that Heidi said, I was like, yes, it's that. It's exactly that. That's exactly right. That's what I'm trying to understand. And much of what brought Heidi to this space is what also brought me to this space. And so I sometimes say when I have to describe my research agenda and some of my published work to, hiring committees and others who need to have a sort of distilled version of my research agenda, I say that my research falls into 3 buckets that are overlapping and intersecting. The first of which is body image and eating disorders, the second is gender and sexuality, and the third is social justice. So I am interested in the intersections of these topics. And so sometimes what that means is like, how do we treat eating disorders in sexual minority individuals? How does sexual harassment, the intersection of, social justice and gender, affect the way that we experience our bodies? How can our sexual relationships be safe spaces for our bodies? And how do our partners inadvertently contribute to negative body image? I was giving an interview yesterday, and I was, again, as I do often struggle with, trying to distill my research interests. And so I came up with this central theme of my scholarship, which is how do we make people feel less bad about their bodies and more good about their bodies? And I would say that is kind of what my work tries to understand. And that started with trying to understand women, specifically, mostly cisgender heterosexual women, because we start with what we know. And so I was trying to, in many ways, understand my own experiences and the experiences of the women around me. But in studying women's experiences of body image and eating disorders and sexuality brought me to sexual minority men who struggle with many of the same body image related pressures. And that then brought me to trans folks. And so I do a lot of work with marginalized communities because all of our oppression is interconnected, and a lot of us deal with adjacent and interlocking struggles. And so that's a very heady way of describing the kind of work that I do. And my day-to-day looks pretty different. I work on a lot of different projects because, and Asia knows this because Asia is one of my collaborators. I have a really, so wonderful, so full, I'm so grateful to have it, this really diverse collection of collaborators who touch on, different pieces of this research agenda. I work with Asia on the image-based sexual abuse, this gender and social justice portion of the research agenda. I have people who I work with the social justice and body image portion of the research agenda. I have the eating disorders and gender portion of the agenda. And so my days look really different depending on what projects are ongoing. And it is, every day is an adventure. Every day is a delight. I love doing this work. It's hard work. People hear about it and they are like, that must be so difficult, but it feels so meaningful. And I'm sure, Heidi, you can speak to this as well. It feels really meaningful to start chipping away at it.
I agree 100%. I want to double down on something you just said. You just said bodies as safe spaces. Oh my God, that just went in my brain because I frequently talk in the sexual spaces and like couples sex therapy work that I do around, can we create space together where your sexual time together is about creativity, mutual pleasure within that connection and intimate space that intimate space you've created together. And just the way you phrased it, I was like, oh, chef's kiss right there. Yes, that's gorgeous.
Yes, amazing. It's, yesterday I was talking to Susan Wright with the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. Very cool to talk to somebody who is so amazing. I feel like every day I get to talk to these amazing people. I'm so grateful that my work has taken me to these spaces, including this one where I'm here talking with you, Heidi, and you, Asia, of course, whom I've known for so long. And I still fangirl over the fact that I get to call you a collaborator and a mentor and a friend. But I was talking to Susan about this yesterday, about, pleasure and joy and how our bodies how our sexuality can, when, certain conditions are met, be this really positive, safe place to experience joy and pleasure that we don't get to experience in other portions of our lives. But there are conditions that need to be met for that, right? Like if your body is not a safe space for you, your sexuality is probably not going to be a safe space for you. Because as I say to my students all the time, I teach psychology of human sexual behavior at San Diego State. There are very few experiences in your adult life where you are naked in front of another person and hoping that they like what they see. There are experiences where you're naked in front of another person at the doctor, at, nudist events, if that's something that you're interested in. I used to live in the Bay Area. It's a very open-minded place. But there's very few where your appearance and the way that other people perceive you matters for the way that you view yourself in that space. And so sex is a really unique place for experiencing our bodies and experiencing embodiment. And so, yeah, I think this is a really yummy intersection for us to be discussing today.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really interested how you were saying sort of factors contributing to that safe space internally, as well as that sexual space between people in sexual encounters, whether it's a long-term partner or someone in more of a poly environment or in someone in a other intersectional identity queer spaces with various partners or monogamy within that also. But just to really think about this idea of what does body positivity feel like internally? It's not just, oh, I'm looking in the mirror and I see something that others are going to approve of, right? It's more like, what do I feel in my body about myself as someone who experiences desire and arousal and can experience that with another human being? And so how do we talk about that? I love it that you're researching it, because clinically there's so much rich content that clients bring to me, but also even working with middle schoolers and high schoolers, they talk about this in their own ways, right? Like middle school boys and high school boys have this thing that they've termed now bufforexia, like never buff enough. No matter how strong you are or how good you look, you're not, masculine enough or that sort of thing. And of course, we know all of the beauty standards that young female-bodied folks or female-identifying folks are constantly bombarded with that increase insecurity. And when I'm working with young folks, I'll say something like, who profits if you feel bad about your body? Who profits? Who makes money? What do they rob you of for you feeling bad about yourself, right? Time, creativity, a sense of autonomy, and how do we claim those things for ourselves so that when we have sexual feelings, how we choose to express those within ourself as an individual, with ourself or with any partner or partners, we can take a look at that from an inside out space rather than only from an outside in. I'm wanted, I meet or match current beauty standards, cultural beauty standards, or if I don't meet or match those in any approachable way, what does that mean about my human proximity to pleasure, love, relationship, sex?
Yeah, there's so much that you just said that I think is so wonderful. And I want to give credit to Doctors Tracy Tilka and Jessica Oliva, who are really and also Dr. Nicole Wood-Barkelau. These are three folks who are really leading the charge, have historically led the charge in the positive body image research space. And so, the body positivity movement is adjacent to this literature we have on positive body image, which is a multidimensional construct that we study, including things like body appreciation, body, gratitude for your body image flexibility, the behavioral component adjacent to eating includes intuitive eating. But something that I think is interesting, the literature that I feel really compelled by and motivated to continue is this literature on body functionality appreciation. And so, something that you talked about was, you referred to it as bufforexia. In the literature, we sometimes refer to it, or it has historically been referred to as bigorexia, or I've sometimes even seen manorexia, so there's much to be said about the intersection between gender role norms and expectations and body image ideals. The body image ideals that we have often reflect the gender role ideals that we have for people of different genders. And so, so much of the male gender role is about being big, strong, being a provider, being tough, being able to physically protect. And so a bigger body is compatible with that gender role ideal for men. I've focused a lot on men's body image in my work, not because obviously we refer to women's negative body image as so common as to be normative. We refer to it as normative discontent, negative body image among women. But there's been less attention paid to men's body image historically, and we know that so many men struggle with feelings of negative body image that are more muscularity oriented than thinness oriented. And so this bufforexia or bigorexia is sometimes a presentation of muscle dysmorphia, which is, a subsection of body dysmorphic disorder within the obsessive compulsive and related categories of the DSM. And it has these sort of body image and eating components to it. And I think there is a tendency to just brush off men's concerns about their bodies, either because we think, well, they're not starving themselves, so it's not as big of an issue, but psychologically it can be, or because of a tendency for us to sort of lean on gender role norms and expectations for men to assume self-reliance, right? We think that they can probably handle it themselves, and if men internalize those things, they don't have a language to ask for help for them. Also, if we socially reward those behaviors by saying like, oh, you're so big, you're so tough, as long as, women continue to reward those behaviors as well, then people don't necessarily see them as a problem. And so how do we shift this really messed up perspective that we have on all bodies? We've been talking about men's bodies, but also women's bodies, and, trans and intersex bodies have their own unique concerns and considerations as well. We talk about bodies in this really objectifying way. And when I say objectifying, what I am saying here is, we treat bodies as though they're what they look like and how sexually attractive they are, their sexual capabilities, are capable of representing who these people are. Like their personality traits, their functionality don't really come up in conversations when we're talking about people and their attractiveness or their or in many cases, even their sort of value. We talk about what people look like first. And this can be quite damaging. And so how do we help shift people's attitudes away from what they look like, especially in the context of sex, to how they're feeling, to get connected with your body, which is so vital for experiencing your body as something to be lived in and not looked at, but also for having these positive sexual experiences that are authentic, subjective, and embodied. And so I know I've been sort of, I'm talking about a lot of different things at once, but fundamentally, if we as a society continue to treat people's bodies as things to be evaluated, judged, and looked at, and not homes for people's experiences of the world around them, it's going to continue to be really difficult for people to manage the cognitive labor of continuing to see themselves as subjects in the world and sexual subjects specifically.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jaclyn, and I'm really grateful that people like you are out there doing the research on it. And my part of that in my teaching with young people and in my work with clients in the therapy room or group work in spaces that I also do that sort of internal work around how can we feel ourselves, right? I don't mean just with our hands touching ourselves. I mean, how can we do that internal space where we feel breath, where we can bring breath through our face, through our chest, to our body, and actually down into our genital spaces, through our root to connect through our tailbone. How can we, and I know I'm getting a little esoteric here, but how do we allow ourselves to breathe into our body spaces and literally feel what it feels like to live in our body? Because if it's all external focused, then it becomes, do I look good enough and do they look good enough from an external perspective for us to bang our bodies together and hope that somebody or everybody gets off, right? Instead, it can become, whoa, from this embodied perspective, can I be safe enough in my own body? Can this person I'd like to connect with and engage with be safe enough in their own body also? And if we're speaking about an eighth grader, it's, can we have courage enough to say, gosh, I really like you, and if you're open to it, can we kiss? Right? Wow. Yeah, I would like that. And what does it feel like in your body to have someone say, I like you, I want to kiss you, right? And if we can't even have those conversations starting in puberty or even before around consent and consent focused language, I really lean on like Betty Martin's learning around that. Like, if you're open to it, I would like to, right? And how do we teach that language early? If you think you'd enjoy it, I'd like to invite you to the camping trip that my family's going on this week. Even in non-sexual frameworks, we're not very good at it as human beings. So how if we can't do it in non-sexual frameworks, how can we begin to front end load this and teach it so that we can do it in sexual spaces and with ourselves? Not, oh, all my friends are going out tonight to the bar. I should look really hot because they're all going to want to meet people. I should want to do that too. Not ever stopping to say, gosh, do I want to go out tonight? Is that a space I feel good being in right now? What kind of person or people am I open to meeting? What would it feel like in my body if I liked someone? How would I know if I wanted to continue a conversation? How would I know if I wanted to hook up? What does that feel like in my body? So from my lens in clinical spaces and teaching spaces, it's very simply with kids, it's what does happy feel like in your body? What does yes feel like in your body if you want to have a cookie? What does no feel like if someone says, can I borrow your hoodie? I'm cold. And can you articulate, no, I don't want to share my hoodie with you. I just got it for my birthday and I'm not comfortable sharing it. Are you willing to risk somebody saying, oh my God, you're so selfish, right? So how do we front end load and learn these things early in non-sexual ways so that we start knowing how to do it from early in life and can translate that as we grow? And then when we've got folks who are locked in these outside in conceptions of what we're supposed to be like, how can we begin to teach that inside out piece? Can you pause before saying yes to something that you're not sure you want to do? Can you check in with that gut response? Or does this feel unsafe? Am I having an uh-oh feeling? Right?
Yeah, it's funny. I was in thinking about what I said at the very beginning. My research is body image, gender, and social justice. I feel like we covered body image and gender, and now we're here at social justice.
Social justice. Yes.
That's why these things are interlocking. But yeah, I think we are so far from this authentic yes and authentic no, because so many young people don't receive any sexual education at all. And the sexual education that many do receive is abstinence only or abstinence preferred, right? Abstinence idealized, which is not compatible with us understanding the experiences that we're having in our bodies, right? That is actually antithetical to trusting your body and learning how your body is responding to things. Because when you are just told you should always say no, right? Then you are not actually authentically having this experience. And it's unique to sexuality because especially for women, in so much of the rest of our lives, we are taught to be accommodating and agreeable and say yes to everything. No, don't rock the boat. Don't upset other people. And so, I think that we are touching on this odd, unique element of the way that we treat sexuality as a fundamental problem, something to be avoided, something to not be enjoyed. Your body is not supposed to be a source of pleasure, and you should deny yourself every source of pleasure. I thought it was interesting. The example that you used also was, do you want this cookie? Does this cookie taste good? Another thing that women are sort of like discouraged from doing to experience the pleasure of food, right? We are, as a society, so uncomfortable with pleasure, and especially women's pleasure, that we are taught to just cut it off at the knees, right? Don't experience it. Don't think about the way that your body is responding to this, because just say no to anything that could be pleasurable for you. And so I think, yeah, I mean, we're spiraling here. We're going off and off, but I feel like this happens every time we get in a room together, you and me, Heidi, which is just like, everything is like, yes, and. And this might be the Broadway connection we were talking about before we started recording, that we are just like improving here. But yes. Yeah, I just agree with you about everything. It's amazing having another person who I feel like is doing the space. And you're talking about, getting in your body, doing all this stuff. And I hear that and I'm like, no, that's hard. I'll keep writing papers. So I think it's amazing that you're out in the world doing this and encouraging people to do it, because that's a lot harder than the work that I'm doing over here behind my computer, up in my head and out of my body.
Somehow I don't think so. And I think that yes, and all of it's required. All of it's required, Jaclyn. I love what you said about the everything, if everything's a no. What I frequently say to parents is, if your children learn that everything related to sexual feelings and sexual behavior is a no, yes is impossible. And if we're not taught in a staged way to have discernment about yes to this right here, right now with you, or no, not now. Maybe when I'm older, but that's not what I want now. Or no, I don't think that's something I'm ever going to be interested in, but I don't have to know that yet. And then there's that middle space of maybe, because if someone's curious and interested, but they're uncertain, right? There can be this sense of like, maybe, and maybe can be, tell me more. Like, ooh, maybe. What are you asking? Say more. Or maybe it can be like, yeah, maybe, meaning like, hell no, but not empowered to say no, right? So again, really working with those shades internally is about embodiment. How would I know if things are aligned for a certain yes or a certain no? Or how will I navigate that space in between? Which is where I know you work with a lot of college students in your teaching role. And I see this a lot with being close to University of Michigan's campus. I see a lot of college students, and there becomes this, well, F it moment, right? I'll do 2 more shots and just go for it, which is completely not listening to one's body and staying with the I'm unsure and tell me more space with any potential partner for any potential sexual experience, which I know we both have histories in looking at violence and the role of violence and trauma too, which again, all of these things are so interconnected that we could talk for 8 hours.
Yes, and I have noticed Asia taking notes in the way that sometimes when my therapist starts taking notes, it means I should stop talking and let my therapist start talking. I am going to let Asia ask a question.
No, I honestly, I'm just in a learning space here. I'm wanting actually a specific type of education from you both. So we have touched on so many topics. The fact that we live in a culture of self and other objectification, the fact that we don't live in a culture of consent, sex is a no. We don't live in a culture where embodied pleasure is okay. We seem so far from being able to say that our bodies are safe spaces. How do we start taking steps towards being embodied creatures? And maybe we start with what you would tell to a 7th or 8th grader. Maybe, how do we bring the audience along? Like, we can't go from 0 to 100 right away. How do we start taking steps towards embodied pleasure?
Oh my God, I love this question so much. Thank you. Set the phone down. Pause. Move slower. Breathe. Yeah, I just saw you breathe actually as I said it, right? And all of a sudden your energy just landed, right? And in this moment, our eyes connected and I saw you more deeply, Asia, right? That's embodied connection right there, right? That means slowing down in our life enough to taste that wonderful cup of coffee that you're drinking. You know, self-care gets looped into this basket of bubble bath and candles. Self-care is really about, can you taste the food that you're eating? Are you willing to pause on that jog outside that you're doing for exercise and really breathe, smell the flowers that are blooming, feel the breeze on your skin, notice the rise and fall of your respiration and your heartbeat in those moments? When we can slow down in those ways, even for a moment, we are teaching embodied practice to ourselves and giving ourselves that gift so that we can share it with others. So notice, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling anxious. Anxiety is not an emotion. Anxiety is what we go to when we are avoiding our emotions. So again, I'm anxious. What am I actually feeling? Oh, I'm sad because another anti-trans law got passed and the trans people in my life who I love are hurting and frightened. I'm mad because I want to go bust heads and there's nobody to do that for, and I'd get arrested for doing that. So again, it's how can we slow down to name it? And sometimes being an ally for, I mean, I know this is an audio broadcast. I'm a middle-aged white woman in a straight marriage, and being an ally requires being willing to feel in spaces with others who are marginalized in ways that I'm not. So embodied practice means activating our allyship from an embodied space too. Otherwise, I run the risk of being one of those well-meaning white people that take everything personally and center myself. And I don't want to do that. So it is just that moment of being willing to breathe and notice and be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it sounds like you are talking also about mindfulness and being present in your body, experiencing your body. I think you use this language, but from the inside out rather than from the outside in. Mm-hmm. And I think as a society, we do not encourage people to do that. We're a very appearance-centric society. We put a lot of emphasis on what people look like rather than how they feel. And you mentioned very briefly, but it caught my attention because I, as a budding anti-capitalist, like who profits from us, from our insecurities, from these things that you are buying in order to feel better about yourself. I thought that was a great point. And I think that, you know, when we're talking with younger folks, these are great. And I think these principles apply to older adults as well. I'm thinking also about what I teach my students, specifically in the context of sex, because I teach this class on sexuality. And so when we're talking about sex and we're not in our bodies, when we are focused on, you know, what does my chin look like in this position? Or like, when was the last time I shaved? Or whatever it is, whatever.
My belly's poking out. I ate recently.
Right. Right. God forbid. Right. I mean, I think, so we refer to this as spectatoring, when you're either focusing on your appearance or on your performance during sex. And when we're spectatoring, we're more focused on what this looks like, what our partner is thinking, than on what we're feeling. And especially for folks with female sexual anatomy, that's when you're spectatoring, you have cognitive preoccupation about what your partner's experiencing or what you look like. It's going to be really difficult for you to experience the sensations in your body necessary for you to experience actual sexual pleasure, because sex is supposed to feel good, which is also not something that we teach young women either. I have this anonymous question and answer forum for my Psych of Sexuality class, and the number of questions in earnest I get from young women in my class saying, so we all know sex is not supposed to feel good for women. No, we don't all know that. Actually, we don't know that at all.
Who taught you that?
I know. It's like horrifying. Every semester, the first few weeks, I am just like grappling with these misconceptions we have about sexuality with students. But so when we're spectatoring, we are not focused on the pleasurable sensations that we're having in our bodies. And when we're more focused on our partner's experiences than our own, we may not feel comfortable to advocate for ourselves and say like, hey, actually, I'm having a little bit too much friction right now. Let's pause. Let's try another fun activity that's not penetrative sex. Exactly. And then we can get to this when it feels better for both of us. Which, by the way, your partner wants you to have a good experience too. And if your partner doesn't, maybe good to consider.
Don't have sex with that person.
Yeah, maybe consider if that's a person. You know, I would never tell you what to do, but maybe consider if that's the right person for you to be having sex with. But yeah, so in the context of sex, thinking about are we spectatoring or are we mindful in this experience? But also in our day-to-day lives, how can we stop thinking about what we look like and start thinking about what we feel like? And this body of research that I have recently become obsessed with, like any person in my personal life will tell you that I am talking about this constantly, I'm very annoying about this, is Dr. Jessica Oliva's work on the Expand Your Horizons program. And so if my go-to, what I would tell any person to do if they are struggling with feeling like they can't stop thinking about what they look like and are having a really difficult time feeling what they're feeling and feeling anything about their body except shame or dissatisfaction about what they look like, is to go to the Expand Your Horizons website and participate in the Expand Your Horizons program. Dr. Oliva, who is just brilliant. I feel like she has really hit the nail on the head with this. And I think, you know, all the empirical research suggests that this is having a really beneficial impact on people. They'll participate in these 3 writing exercises where you spend a little bit of time reflecting on these functionality elements of your body. And it's not just like, I'm grateful that I can climb a mountain. It's like, why do you feel grateful for your digestion? Why do you feel grateful for the physical sensations that you have potentially during sex, right? She breaks it down into these different dimensions of functionality that we can feel grateful for in our bodies. Spend 45 minutes doing this. Every study that I've seen, you know, it's not going to work perfectly for every person. That's not how statistics and averages work. But every study that I have seen has shown improvements in body functionality appreciation and body appreciation, not just functionality, but the way that we feel about our bodies overall from participating in this. So if I had to give you do one thing after this, one concrete step is consider participating in the Expand Your Horizons program. It's free. All of the materials are available right on the website, Dr. Oliva's website. It's almost magical to start thinking about your body outside of what it looks like. Because for so many of us, we've never thought about it, especially for young people, college students who have spent so much of their lives, you know, because of the pandemic, either on Zoom or on Instagram or on TikTok, looking at themselves and looking at other people, thinking about being grateful for this magical thing that you have that is your body, that does all of these amazing, cool things. It heals your sinuses and sinus infections. I hope eventually mine will be healed. It heals. I had oral surgery last week. My body is healing from that. Our bodies are amazing. Like, it's really unbelievable how many things our bodies do. And when we're so focused on like, oh no, but I have a pimple, or like, you know, the new body trend is this, and I still have the old body trend because body ideals are constantly shifting. We miss out on the opportunity to be fascinated and inspired by the incredible things that our body does and allows us to feel. And so there are ways to get more embodied during sex, and also to think about these sensations in our day-to-day lives as well.
I agree completely. And what I would say to double down on that, if you are in a current relationship and partnered, stop. And if you are open to it, have the conversation with your partner. When do you feel most embodied? And talk about what that means. When do you feel able to connect from that internal place inside? and really see what they respond. Really use some of those mirroring skills. What it sounds like you're telling me is you feel most embodied like when we're laying there together, looking into each other's eyes and really just feeling our bodies breathe together. Do I understand you correctly? Yes, yes, that's it, right? Or I feel most embodied when we are laughing together and cooking dinner and we're just being goofy. And, we're wearing sweats and an old t-shirt and I've taken my bra off for the day and we're just being goofy because we can. If we can start to notice those moments with our partners when we feel most embodied, we're more likely to catch ourselves doing it in the moment, not reflectively, which is super helpful. And if you're not currently partnered, have those conversations with yourself around when am I most present? When do I feel my breath? And actually, for some people, they may feel more anxiety as they start to do that because it's such a novel experience. And then if you're someone who works with children or has children or you're around children, work with embodiment on a regular basis. For example, I'm full, I don't want to eat anymore. Okay, your tummy's saying it's had enough food for right now. All right. Rather than, oh, just take 3 more bites, right? So like really helping a person listen to their body. Or the sweater feels scratchy. Okay, let's really notice that scratchiness and let's try to find something that feels more comfortable for your body, right? So again, working with noticing and not insisting that kids push through physical discomfort in service of somebody else's agenda. And that teaches consent as well as mindfulness. I think part of the reason we as a culture lack mindfulness is because we've been pushed to ignore so many signals so frequently. So again, bringing it back as simply as possible for ourselves and for those around us gives us an opportunity to shift it culturally through time.
I love it. Everything you're saying is brilliant. I look forward to your next book because I love everything you have to say. It's been such a delight spending this time with you. I do want to say, especially for couples, I say this in my classes, ask men about their body image. Ask men about their experiences of their bodies. I think women are we have a language to describe the way that we feel about our bodies. We talk to one another about our bodies. There are articles written for us about our bodies and our body image and how to feel better in our bodies. But we don't have the same for men. And when I teach, so I have a pretty popular lecture that I give, for the Sexual Health Alliance, and I've given it a few universities about sexuality and body image. The students are, every single time they comment, I never thought to ask my male partner about his body image. I never thought about how he might be feeling about his body. Men struggle too. They don't talk about it as much because of those gender role norms for men. So ask men and listen. Be empathetic when, if men feel open, when men feel ready to share that with you. Because men are experiencing a lot of the same feelings that women are about their bodies, sometimes qualitatively different. The concerns look a little different because the body ideals are different. But when men are ready to be vulnerable with you about their bodies, something that they're concerned about is the way that you will respond to that. They're afraid that it's going to make them seem not masculine if they share this concern about their bodies. And so if you have to be ready to ask the question and you have to be ready to listen and to support, because we have a tendency to brush aside men's feelings about their bodies, and men feel concerned that their concerns are going to be brushed aside. And so I think this is true for people across the gender spectrum, of course. But I think we need to take special care with men's body image because for many men, if you ask them this question, it will be the first time anyone has ever asked them a question about their body image. So I mean that sincerely. And then the other point is just for trans, intersex, non-binary folks. So many people have never been taught that their bodies are problems, have been taught that their bodies have been medicalized, their bodies have been politicized, their bodies have been the subject of cultural debate rather than a site to experience joy and pleasure inside of.
To live.
And
Yeah.
to live and breathe and experience the delights and joys and pleasures of being alive. And so I think we just really need to take so much care of each other in these spaces and in these conversations, because for so many people, as we said from the very beginning, our bodies have not been treated as safe places for us to live. And so if we invite someone into a space where your body's a safe place to live, you have to ensure that that space remains safe for them.
I hate that I have to wrap this up, but it is time. I got so much out of this podcast. Some of the things I learned were about breathing and slowing down as a step towards embodiment, noticing your body, asking men about their body if you're not a man, and listening and taking care of each other, and embodiment as a path toward allyship, which I'd never heard before. So thank you both so much. We're going to continue this conversation, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you for listening. That was Mindbridge, where science meets human rights. To learn more about how we use brain and behavioral science to empower human rights defenders, find us at mindbridgecenter.org and follow us on social media.